you all to the 20th inaugural lecture of University of Moratuwa. It's a great honor to have you all on this occasion today. And now I would like to invite Professor Tishan Jayasingh at University of Moratuwa to introduce our professor for the day.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great privilege to introduce Professor Upendra Rajapakse. So, he first entered University of Moratuwa in 1983, and that was for his BSc in Built Environment that he completed in 1987, and then he continued his studies leading to MSc in Architecture. So, which means he would be able to practice on his own. So he started a practice that he continued over 8 years, and he was especially involved in commercial buildings, though he also designed many houses for reputed many clients. And then in the year 2000, he was fortunate to win a scholarship, and it was called International Research Scholar Dual Scholarship, and he was at University of Queensland. University in Australia, there are 10 top-ranked universities, and University of Queensland is one of the highest ranked within those 10. And he finished his PhD in 2004. The title of the PhD is a very pertinent one, that is Exploration of Courtyard Typology in Non-Domestic Buildings in Australia. And we all know Australia has subtropical climatic conditions, so he specialized on dealing with buildings in subtropical climatic conditions in Australia. And when he was reading for his PhD, he was also involved in a large housing project where the climatic conditions are subtropical that prevails in Queensland. And one of his designs won the Southeast Queensland Environmental Award in early 2000s. After completing his PhD, he came to Sri Lanka, and because he had been practicing, he again started his own practice. And when an opportunity was offered, he joined University of Moratuwa in 2005. So once he joined, he had a huge wealth of knowledge on a very pertinent topic, that is energy efficient buildings. So he introduced to the undergraduate program and the postgraduate programs how to design free-running buildings when the climatic conditions are tropical or warm, humid tropical. So with that, he actually started some student exchange programs as well. And one of the key collaboration was with Münster University of Germany. And during 2010, again, he got another opportunity to engage in deep research with an Australian Research Council grant, generally known as ARC grant, to work with Professor Richard Hyde of University of Sydney. So that was 2010 to 2012, and upon returning, he was again fully engaged in research and development and teaching, and gradually he was invited to become a reviewer for many journals, and then he became an associate editor and a reviewer for Architectural Science and Review Journal of Taylor and Francis, UK. Since 2015, and also by now he is a reviewer for many other journals as well. So he is an expert in designing energy efficient buildings and factories for warm, humid tropical climates, and there are few factories that have been designed with very special features for very special passive features. So, and currently he's working on a very important book chapter, and that's called Architecture at Net Zero Buildings. So, the wealth of knowledge that Professor Upendra Rajapakse has on the kind of buildings we need for future. Those are either carbon zero buildings or net zero buildings or free running buildings. It's very valuable, and I'm sure he's going to share some of his thoughts with us. So I cordially invite Professor Upendra Rajapakse to deliver his lecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tishan Singh, for the introduction. So, welcome to my lecture. And today I'm going to talk about very specific type of buildings, architecture net zero. As you all know, architecture is about space. Architecture is about a collection of meaningful spaces composed in the building system. So architecture usually demands energy. It needs energy at different stages. Particularly, architecture needs energy during operational stage, which is very extensive. So my effort today is to show you how interventions can be introduced to minimize this demand, and then minimize the emissions due to buildings, and then how we can mitigate the problem of climate change. So I would like to welcome all of you, Dean of my Faculty of Architecture, then all the other academic staff in the university, very particularly academic staff in the University of Morocco Department of Architecture, and also some of the students as well, then members from the industry and members from other schools as well. Then I also welcome viewers who are joining online today. Okay, let me start the presentation. Now, my presentation is partially a design masterclass for students and architects. Then partially it's an outcome of my research carried out during the past few years, and also partially a reflection of student research. So with all due respect to professionals and people who are involved in building design and building industry, I'm showing the first slide to demonstrate the problem that we have at the moment. It's a crisis situation, and the two photographs you can see are residential buildings, and they are designed for people. The building on the left has very small windows, and it's a lump, compact, cubic space, and there are many levels inside. The problem with that building is heat stress on it and heat gain, and indoor environments are overheated. Then the people living in that building has some economic restrictions to go for air conditioning. So temperature inside is around 38-39 centigrade degrees. So you can imagine the problems that people in that building has. Then on the other hand, another residential building in Colombo, and which is designed for a specific category of people. And the problem with that building is similar to the other building as well, and its problem is severe than the other building. For example, the building is facing to all four orientations through glass windows, but the severe problem is its western tower is angled, maximizing the western sun. Western sun in tropics is not necessary, as you know, so it brings more heat. So the problem in this building is heat inside and overheated indoors. But the economic situation in that building is it is air conditioned fully, so then it needs more energy, and it demands more energy from non-renewable energy resources. As a result, it contributes immensely to emissions. So these are two sides of the problem that I am going to show. And it is a criticism, but it's not a criticism about the people who are involved in these two buildings. It's a criticism of the situation, and also the main objective of this criticism is learning. So we'll try to understand what areas of a building needs energy. Starting from the column 1, you can see the number 1. Starting from the bottom, building needs energy in the production of materials, then in the transport of materials to the sites, and then construction. Then those three areas are usually termed as embodied energy. And then after finishing the building, you need to run the building with people. That's the operational stage, and operational stage also demands a certain amount of energy, and all together contributes nearly 30% of emissions in the global scenario, and it's no exception for Sri Lanka as well. So the graph 2, the picture 2 shows the comparison of embodied energy and operational energy. You can see that there's a certain amount of embodied energy in the early years, but it increases over the time the operational energy component. So there's a huge difference between embodied energy and operational energy. And if you divide the operational energy, and if you look at in detail, the graph 3 shows how it divides for cooling and lighting. Altogether, nearly 72% of energy during operational stage is either for lighting or cooling. So there is a concern about, can we reduce this amount of energy during operational stage? Doesn't mean that you need to design buildings completely free run, but you can minimize the unnecessary demand and optimize the situation inside. So how do we do? So there are three interventions that we can see what's happening in the world, 1, 2, and 3. And these three types of interventions are now mapped on this slide against effectiveness or impact of the intervention towards achieving emission reduction targets, and whether it is bottom-up or top-down approach. The first approach is primarily aimed at implementing policies and promises. I see that as a top-down approach, and it's usually measured in financial cost. In the policies, the environmental cost is transferred to financial cost. Then the second and third are integrated together. The second option is to intervene at the production of materials and production of the building. And number 3 is the interventions measured in operational stage at the operation stage. So we'll see how these three interventions works in combination. So the first one is about global policies. There are several global summits happening in the world over the last many years. For example, COP for the last 27 years. And there are many promises under different subjects like climate finance. So climate finance needs the countries that contribute to this problem pay the other nations who are suffering from this problem. So like that, they are very much mitigating and adapting the people to climate. Then it promotes collaboration of various parties. And the next one is going to happen in the next month in Dubai, which is COP28. And now there's a new term coming into play, climate diplomacy. So we'll see how effective they are. But on the ground situation, the situation is different. There are dissatisfaction over failures of promises everywhere in the world. But in Sri Lanka, we don't see much, but we have this problem in place. So what are the crisis situation or the problems with this issue? Most of them can be quantified, most of them can be seen through your eyes, but some of the problems cannot be seen through your eyes. For example, bushfire, floods, landslides, and snow is due to climate change, and they can be quantified. And then waste, that's an interesting topic, and waste can be seen in some respect, waste cannot be seen in some respect. I will explain in detail what the type of waste which cannot be seen to the naked eye. Then the next problem is heat stress. Now the issue of heat stress is neglected, and for example, people live in Sri Lanka in a tropical country. We think that it's usual and we are going to use it and we are going to live with that. The problem with heat stress is its negative impact on the buildings. So how this heat stress will create negative impacts on building? For example, if you take the city of Colombo is a tropical country, you can see the white clouds always. That means we have diffuse radiation everywhere. And thermal images of the city demonstrate the severity of this issue. And some of the research from National Building Research Organization shows that the heat waves in most of the sub-cities, sub-towns in the Columbus city is well above the recommended levels. So one of the NRC research grant that we handled for 3 years involved 86 buildings in Columbus City. And this is a thermal image of one office building in Borella. And red surfaces shows that its surface temperature is around 40.9 centigrade degrees. So there are 86 buildings. I'm unable to show the real pictures because with all due respect, I'm going to show this as a lesson for learning. So then we collected and we calculated energy utility index of all these 86 buildings. And we found that the average of our office buildings, the energy utility index is around 250 kilowatt hours per meter square per annum. The graph on the right shows the energy utility index levels of all these 86 buildings. And the blue line shows the average level. There are two circles, X and Y. X is in red and Y is in green. So X has 400 kilowatt hours per meter square per annum, and Y has nearly 100 kilowatt hours per meter square per annum. So one might think that green buildings, the buildings within that green circle is better and good. But if you look at them in detail, the situation is like that. Y is one example from the lowest category, from the category which has lower energy utility index, and the X is another detailed investigation of a building from a category which belongs to higher energy utility index. In both categories, you can see the set point temperature is 20 centigrade degrees, 24 centigrade degrees, but internal temperature is shown in shaded areas. Internal temperature is not close to 24 centigrade degrees. Internal temperature moves well above set point temperature. And in the weekends, the purple color areas are weekends. In the weekends, the building internal temperature moves extensively higher levels. So this is the problem that we have in our commercial buildings, in our office buildings, in in Columbus City, for example. And it's a general incident that we can imagine that it's a common to it's common to the entire country in most of the cities. Another example, the building has a very narrow form. Usually, we have very narrow plots due to economic reason because we subdivide our lands in cities for economic purpose. So we have narrow frontage and deep forms. And thermal investigation of this building shows that um, there is a diversity of indoor temperatures in a typical floor plan, but all the measurements are well above 24 centigrade degrees. The area or the internal area close to the facade is having 34.5 centigrade degree because the hot sun is outside. So it's another dimension of this critical issue. Then another building, the same internal temperatures are much higher than the set point temperature. So air conditioners are not capable of handling these buildings indoor environments. So another one, this is an outcome of a student research, part of NRC grant. So that shows the typical scenario in most of our buildings. The typical scenario is overheating, it's well above ambient. This is a free running mode. This building is having airflow, natural light, but the problem with free running buildings in tropics is the indoors are overheated. Usually in free running buildings, indoor temperature closely follows the ambient temperature. So the pattern is similar. The indoor air is much higher than the ambient level. And then there's another line that shows the external climate, external microclimate. So even external microclimate is higher than ambient. So these are primarily due to building design, climate, surrounding context, usage, and attitudes. Attitudes is it's attitude with the designers. It's the attitude with the professionals because if professionals design these buildings, we won't see this kind of building. So then in a context like that, we cannot ask people to go for free running buildings. So it's a problem. So we are trying to understand this problem, then we can find a solution. So what's the way forward? What's the way forward with global summits and oppositions on the ground? But I don't believe that. But we have done some work in Sri Lanka. I found two documents. One prepared by United Nations Development Program. Another one is World Bank. And there are certain problems identified in this document. But I would like to mention that the building stock or the problems with buildings and problem of overheating issue is not addressed enough here, even here. There are certain sections referred in this document about heat waves in Sri Lanka, but not its effect on buildings and then the indoor overheating situations in buildings. So therefore, there's a need or gap that we need to fulfill. So how do we do that? First, we need to understand our own climate. The graph on the left shows a bioclimatic chart on about Colombo city. Now there are the blue areas with the comfort zone. You said is the comfort zone, and we prefer in natural conditions, we prefer a temperature range like 23 to 28 within a particular level of humidity. Then it can be extended by introducing natural airflow. Then it can slightly extend it towards like 29. But the red dots and blue dots shows hourly temperature averages for a typical year. There are about 8,200 dots there, and all the dots are well above comfort zone. Nearly 60% of data points are within 27 and 38 centigrade degrees. So that shows the problem with our climate. With our climate, can we have free running buildings? We cannot have free running buildings. That's a big problem that we have, right? So how shall we address this issue? We have to fight with the climate. We have to fight with the climate using the building design, using architecture, using a specific type of architecture. It's having a window is not favorable because windows brings heat. So therefore, we have to have a very specific type of architectural typology to fight climate. In fact, fight the negative effects of climate. There are good things about the climate. We can take good things, but we can reject negative elements of the climate. So how do you do? So the next two steps, 2 and 3, is for that. Embodied energy component of a building and the operational energy component of building. My presentation is framed in the context of buildings, but it can apply to other areas as well. So this is the solution set that I am going to propose. In fact, this is my postdoctoral thesis, and I have developed that one after doing several research in Sri Lanka. So there are many solution sets that we can implement to fight the climate or to fight the negative effects of climate. So what are these? You start to read from right to left. So the first one, microclimate. So you need to have interventions at the microclimate level, not trees. You can have energy efficient buildings without any single tree. That's my argument. Because trees create shading, that's fine, but it will avoid overheating, but it cannot reduce the ambient climate because ambient climate is shaded climate under a tree. But that is around 33 centigrade degrees in Colombia. So how do we reduce the air temperature below 33? Trees will definitely enhance, but main purpose is how do we manipulate our building design to create a favorable microclimate around it. You can see two small images on the right. The one on top is a courtyard building, two buildings. Courtyard is in the center and is perfectly orientated on east and west. East and west is having shorter facades. But the problem is the courtyard gets the sole access from east to west throughout the day. So its microclimate is very hot, but you can simply modify that form, keeping the same form with the courtyard, change the orientation slightly and change the form slightly and create more shading from the building itself. So like that, there are many strategies. We can think about daylight as well. Then come to the next level, building form, building plan form and sectional form. Now the two images there, just focus your eyes to the two images in the center, the building form category. The lower one is a cross section through a courtyard building. The courtyard is in the center and two massing on the two sides, ground floor and first floor. The courtyard gets direct sunlight, which is unnecessary. So how do we improve this design solution to have more shading on the courtyard and around the building? You can simply lift up the left volume, leaving the ground floor vacant or free. Then the left or the west side big mass creates more shading on the courtyard. So this is just one example, but there are 101 solutions like that. Then the next stage or the next stage of intervention is building envelope. So what kind of material that you want to use, whether it is high mass or low mass, and there are certain different types of ventilation systems. For example, night ventilation. How about ventilating a building in the night? We usually close our windows due to environmental issues, but if we can avoid all these dust or mosquito problems, can we design our buildings with night ventilation? So my presentation is primarily focused on three things. First, high mass materials with night ventilation and in the sectional flow. So those are the three things that I'm going to highlight. It doesn't mean that I'm going to forget the other areas, but there are many options. Then when you optimize all these elements, then the next level come into play. What is the next level? Mechanical plants. You can then install, you can fix efficient systems, efficient air conditioning systems, efficient lighting systems. But if you do that one without optimizing the architectural design to minimize heat gain and remove heat from the building interiors to outside, the systems will not work. So the three areas: thermal mass, night ventilation, and building section. Thermal mass is a material component. Night ventilation is about heat transfer. Building section is about the medium that promote heat transfer, and that is the architectural space. So how do we manipulate these three elements in one system? So it's important that we will start with materials, thermal mass, and you can see in the red circle, there are certain type of materials marked as materials with low embodied energy. For example, you can see concrete. For example, concrete is a low embodied energy material, and there are other materials like brick, coal, quartz, and all. So we will see how this thermal mass can apply with night ventilation. Before that, we will try to understand how this thermal mass behaves with the heat, with the climate. So the figures or the bricks or the sections shown on the left. Now by 4 a.m. in the morning, the section through the wall has an outside and inside. So by 4 o'clock in the morning, the thermal mass is cool because all the heat absorbed during the daytime is released back to the environment because nights are cold. Then by 6 o'clock, with sunrise, its outside surface temperature started to increase, and that affects the internal surface as well. So heat slowly transfers into the inside. By 2 o'clock, for 14 p.m., the both internal and external surfaces has reached to a higher level. By 4 o'clock, it's reached to the maximum level. Then after that, it again started to decrease because in the night, the outside is cold, so heat will go back to outside or heat will transfer into the building. So figure A shows how heat is transferred into the building and what happened after that. When heat is transferred into the building, the internal thermal walls or internal thermal mass absorb this heat and it absorbs to the maximum level. And then after the saturation point, the heat will release back to the indoor space, making the indoor environment overheated. So this is the common scenario that we have in most of our buildings, most of our homes. Because in the night, we close the windows, so we experience this, throughout the year, except for a few days, rainy days. So then the figure on the B has another alternative for that. In its external wall, there is a opening at the lower level, and internal volume is open to outside at the roof level, at the higher level. So what happens is when heat releases from internal walls, the hot air is less dense and it naturally goes up and then it removes from the space. So the B is much better in terms of A. So that's how the material works in a space. So this one, I would like to spend few more minutes on this, and it's an interesting slide, and I think there are many things we can learn from this slide. I have mapped 5 models, A, B, C, D, and E. All models are sections of a building, a typical section of a typical building, and the floor area is same, and the section is almost same. But there are differences in detailing in the section. So the A is a typical building section. It has a ground floor, first floor, and another floor with a roof. And it's a sealed building. It has windows but sealed. So it brings heat, and that's the common typology we can found in most of the towns in Sri Lanka, right? Because they are completely sealed, and its temperature, the internal temperature could be around 36 or 39, and interiors can be seen overheated all the day during the daytime and nighttime as well, and it's well above the comfort range. You can see the comfort range. So this is against efficiency of building climate interplay. Building climate interplay is how building interacts with the climate for efficiency, and against indoor air temperature. So model 1 has higher temperatures, overheated, well above comfort range, and that is an exclusive typical mode. Why exclusive? Exclusive from the climate. It doesn't take the climate into consideration. Forget the climate, design the building. So that's the typical scenario. But it has, I have written demand as 100, for example, say this building, because it's overheated, so its energy demand during the operation to maintain its thermal comfort and visual comfort, say imagine that it needs 100 units, so demand is 100. The next model is B. B has windows. Windows can be open. Whenever you want to open the window, you can open and take ventilation, breeze into the building. But problem with airflow is it brings heat, because we are in a diffuse environment, so we have diffuse radiation everywhere. So whenever you open the window, it brings heat, but it's better than the previous one. So its internal temperature could be 33 or 36 centigrade degrees. But it is an inclusive typical mode, but it's not the best we can do. But again, its internal environment is outside or well above comfort range. The next model is C. C has some protected windows with shading. So when there is a window, the window can be recessed in and create some shading or veranda. So then it can refine some hot air, but still it will be at the ambient level. Because ambient level is 33, so it will be around 33 or 34. That is an inclusive refined mode. So all these three models are well above comfort zone. And the refined mode, the demand is about, say, definitely less than 100, so say 80. The B model has 90, so it reduces the demand. When you intervene with the building design, the demand can be reduced. This is a theoretical discussion, and I have evidence to show this is correct. So the next one is D. D is completely designed for night ventilation. It's a new thing for us. Buildings designed for night ventilation. When you design the buildings to night ventilation, it removes all the heat and cool the entire structure. For example, if you use concrete or high thermal mass gets cooled throughout the night. And then on the following day morning, it's ready to absorb more heat. So when there is airflow comes into the building with heat, the heat component can be absorbed into the thermal mass, so reducing the internal temperature. So its temperature could be seen around 26 to 28, and its demand could be reduced to 45. And then the same building can be used in the daytime as well, slightly above the comfort range, but both D and E forms can be applicable and favorable for us promoting indoor comfort. Right? So their demand is for either 45 or 50, for example. Imagine relatively lower than the first 100. So there's a difference between the A and D or C. It's about 40 units. What is that? That's a waste. Okay? So this is a waste we don't see, but it's a real waste, and it damages the environment. So this is the scenario or the situation that we live in here in Sri Lanka at the moment. So these are some of the examples of how we overcome this situation. Now, model A is a typical scenario. It brings heat, stagnate inside, becomes overheated, and in the night you close all the windows, and then even in the night it's overheated. So how do you overcome this? You have opportunities to craft the section. How do we craft? For example, the section, there can be outlets at the higher level, outlets for hot air. So then if you do that, hot air will naturally go up because it's less dense. And so then it will, helpful to remove all hot air. Then the slab, the first floor slab, there can be small openings to improve the connectivity between ground floor and the first floor. So crafting the section. Now, even the previous one, the same design, same space, but in this one, crafting the space will create some favorable situation. Then the figure D has more interventions to the facade. The facade on the left, inlet is controlled, inlet is shaded, and there's an additional shading just outside the building. For example, double skin wall or something. And then when there is some sort of shading or additional protective buffer zone, then it brings less heat compared to the previous models. And then it travels across the building from ground floor to the upper floor. And the height is more between the outlet and inlet. So the stack effect works. So you can simply do, an architect and engineer can simply intervene this crafting exercise. Only thing is, if you take another material like timber won't work in this sort of scenario because timber cannot absorb heat. Timber cannot modify internal temperature because timber is absorbs zero heat. It's so therefore you cannot do any modifications. So if you look at high-rise or multi-level buildings, our practice is to have all the floor levels separated from one and rest of the other floor levels. Because of economic reason, we design floor plates, floors separately stacked one above the other. So therefore, each floor works separately or independent, and each floor brings heat through windows, and it can be overheated around 38 or 39. And then what is the best method to remove this heat? You need airflow, ventilation. But in tropics, we have very slow wind speed, around 1.8 meters per second or 2.2 meters per second. So it's a very slow wind speed because we are in tropics. So this wind speed is not enough to remove all this heat because heat is stagnated inside, and there are computers people use in these spaces. So therefore, there is an internal heat gain component as well. So buildings become overheated, right? So that's a problem we have with even high-rise buildings in Sri Lanka. We have straight facades outside, straight facades with windows or window sockets. So we have many hot ovens, unfortunately. So what's the way out? We can intervene with the sections like that. We can simply connect the floors. These floors connection could be an air shaft. We can design this one. What you need is a small opening from one floor to the other. It doesn't need to be perfectly vertical, but it can be staggered depending on the planning and the architectural design. So then you can take all hot air to the upper level of the building. So upper level of the building can be then open to outside against wind direction, against or with the wind flow. So the wind flow will not disturb this stack flow. So both stack flow and wind flow will work towards the same direction. So figure J shows that one option. The figure K shows a detail of that. For example, two red circles shows internal walls. Now these internal walls are thermal mass. So when this building is ventilated in the night, thermal mass gets cooled, and thermal mass is now ready to absorb more heat on the following day. And then when it absorbs heat, the internal environment becomes relatively better in terms of overheating. So therefore, now I took concrete or low carbon concrete as a material. Now this mapping is about the integration of materials with the building operation. Now, this overall thermal performance in a design system is shown on x-axis, and other axis shows the embodied energy component. For example, if you take D material has very low embodied energy, but it is applied in a wrong architectural design. It is applied in a wrong architectural space that is completely sealed environment. So therefore, its thermal performance is very poor. But on the other hand, B, the same material is applied in a correct architectural space for stack ventilation and night ventilation, and its thermal performance is very high. So definitely B is much better than D. Then how about the C and E? Now C is having high embodied energy, and it is also applied in the wrong architectural space, so its performance is very poor. Then how about the E? E is having materials with high embodied energy, but it is applied in a correct or more appropriate architectural space with night ventilation. So E performs well in the operation stage, but E has high embodied energy material. So which one is better, C or E? So that's an ongoing research at the moment. So I believe that E is better because it has better operational performance, although it has high embodied energy materials. So now I talk about thermal mass and night ventilation. Now, there are historic evidence found in hot dry climates. These are courtyard buildings built with mud, earth walls, compact because then each house is attached to other houses, so it reduces heat transfer from outside because it is compactness. And these buildings have courtyards, very tiny, small, narrow courtyards. In the night, the flat roof collects cold air because these climates are very cold in the night. But during the daytime, its temperature goes to 40. But in the night, it may be around 0 sometimes. So the flat roof collects cold air and it drops through the courtyard and then goes into the space. So this internal space of these buildings, even during the daytime, is very effective. Now the graph A shows 2 lines. The straight line shows the ambient level, maximum peak during the daytime and lowest in the night. But internal temperature, which is shown in dotted line, is much lower than ambient. Right? And this varies depending on the thermal mass, thickness, and its thermophysical characteristics. For example, the graph on the B shows L and L is lightweight. So in lightweight buildings, internal temperature is relatively higher than heavyweight buildings. The next one is lightweight in night ventilation. It's relatively better. Then heavyweight or high thermal mass buildings are better than previous two. And thermal mass in night ventilation is much better. So there are plenty of evidence from other part of the world, especially from hot dry climates. And there's an argument that this effect is practical, and this effect can be seen only in hot dry climates because of the large diurnal temperature range. But with our practice, these are some of the common practices in materials, earth bricks, then concrete surfaces, and burn bricks, etc. So how do we expect this to see in Sri Lanka or in tropics? Now this is a building, a house, very basic house in suburb Colombo, and this was designed a few years ago, and it is an interpretation of a traditional courtyard form. in the traditional courtyard form, the courtyard is very shallow. Problem with that in the modern or the new context is heat. The courtyard can bring heat, but we increase the height of the courtyard and reinterpreted the same form, reinterpreted the same section form, and introduce a tall courtyard. And it works well. And there's a courtyard in the middle, the yellow patch on the plan form, and it is ventilated through X and Y axis. The windows are with louvers, so it is ventilated during the night as well. And the performance was measured in April. April is the worst climate that we have, no wind flow at all, but this house was seen with airflow because of the thermal difference of the air. And its its internal temperature shown in this graph is much lower than ambient level. So it shows there is a potential to apply thermal mass with night ventilation even in tropics. And there's a research done on this and prepared a paper, published, and that paper has attracted 207 international citations. So that gives the justification for the apply of thermal mass and night ventilation in tropics. And this is the paper, and it's not an advertisement, but this is the paper. If you want, you can refer on the Google Scholar. So it describes in a detail how this form works in tropics. So then another work by one of our bachelor student for research dissertation investigated several houses in Goldford. In Goldford, the houses are built with adobe rammed earth, and they are compact houses, and even these forms works well with the climate because of the thermal mass. The graph on top shows how its internal temperature is within the comfortable zone. The graph at the bottom shows the hatch area is the potential for night ventilation. But these houses are not ventilated in the night. As you can see in the section, the building form internal volume is sealed, so there is a clear roof on top, but they are not designed for night ventilation. But the graph on bottom, the straight line shows the peak of the ambient, but dotted line shows the internal temperature, which is moving well below ambient level. So there is a potential of using thermal mass with our climate. But now this research extended to test its potential for night ventilation, and there were some simulations done on this model. A and B shows the present situation, and C is the design change model, and that shows an opening at the roof level. And the graph X is the present situation. The blue line drops to a greater level as shown in graph Y. So night ventilation works well in Goa. This is another example, well-known example. It's a ram earth construction, award-winning design, and one of our students, bachelor student, did a research on this several years ago and found that thermal mass works well. Its temperature drops. All different lines shows different areas because this research involved investigation, thermal performance investigation of several walls, measured several points of the walls, and then average into single figures, and it shows how thermal mass works. It drops with the climate. It's a detailed image of this. The dark line, the dark dashed line shows the internal temperature. Internal temperature drops with night temperature, with surface temperature. Surface temperature helps to bring down the internal temperature. But there is a small problem here. You can see the blue cross line I have drawn, 28 centigrade degrees. So until 12 o'clock in the midday, during the daytime, this building works very well. But after 12 o'clock, its temperature increases. So it gives a good lesson for us because it's an opportunity to have mixed mode buildings in Sri Lanka. So you don't need to air condition the buildings from morning, right? If you design properly, you can have free running modes in the morning, but you can have air conditioners in the afternoon. So mixed mode building basis for that. So if you introduce this building climate interplay properly in the design, the system can be very stable. But if you do not rely on the architectural design, but rely primarily on policies for introducing renewable energy without any interventions to architectural design, so the system is not stable. So therefore, intervention at the design and design development stage is important to increase the performance, increase the thermal performance and visual performance, and then reduce the cost and disruption to the nation. If you do not do that, the graph works to the other way. So one practice example I would like to show, which is already design is already done. Now the construction is happening at the site. So design-led research. So that shows how research outcome is used in the design practice. So this is the real situation. These are real pictures of the place. This is in northwestern province. It's a big area. It's about 80 acres. But although it has 80 acres, there are certain restrictions because the program needs to have a design forest here. So only 15 or 10% of the land is used for buildings. The rest of the 80% will be our forest in the future. So this is an institute, small campus to accommodate 300 bhikkhus to teach Theravada Buddhism over 6 years. So how we started the design is we believe the design process like we teach for students. So there are many entry points for the design process. So we try to understand the situation, and the situation is to, in particular exercise, situation is to design a library. So library is a place for concentration, but it's a place for mindfulness because Buddha's teaching is to promote mindfulness. So we ended up coming or designing a sort of a courtyard form, but land is limited and it's surrounded by beautiful views towards other trees and mountains and water bodies. So if you go higher, you can have a sort of a slightly extroverted, but with the courtyard form, you can have a slightly introverted space. So this is how we started to design this development. In the section, in the middle, the larger picture shows how the internal spaces are arranged. Internal spaces are arranged vertically, but there are volumes, air volumes in between, and this form has a square form. Square forms usually not climate friendly because square form has a equal facade areas, so it has a disadvantage of having a larger facade area towards east and west. But we wanted to have a square form because the program demands a square form. Program demands that form. So therefore, we decided to have a square form, but because of the west sunlight, we introduce a double wall, a complete blind wall to the west, but with slightly minimal openings. So you can see on the section there's a double skin that protects the internal spaces from the westerly sun. And then it arranged, then climate factor came into this and arranged the internal volumes to promote more stack flow across the building from bottom to up. And we avoided the typical section as shown in that arrow. So this is a library. It's an air funnel mode. It's an air funnel, and air funnel works in this section, for example. Now, if you look at this section, there are two thermal walls. The two thermal walls are built with earth from the area, because the area is having a higher water table, so the environment needs more water surfaces. So then take earth from the area, so those earth can be used in the same building. So we find materials from the site itself, and the two thermal walls are ventilated in the night, and thermal walls then gets cold enough to absorb heat on the following day, and then when absorbs, then it will start to release in the afternoon, and then there are two thermal chimneys just on top of the thermal wall, so it releases all heat. So it works as an air funnel. So then so this is only about three things that I discussed: thermal mass, light ventilation, and then sectional flow. But there are plenty of other opportunities. Plenty of other opportunities as shown in this. So it's not time to explain that, because I may need another hour to explain that. So finally, so this is the way forward that we should think of. The graph on the left shows the attitude that we need to inculcate. What is that attitude? The graph shows the three peaks, which is the behavior of ambient temperature. Despite these three peaks, we need to maintain internal temperatures, or we need to synchronize the internal temperatures to a lower level than ambient. So that's the way forward. So that has to be our aim of our climate design. So how do you do is the question. You need to intervene with the architectural design. So even for example, even if a client should be aware of this, even people who are going to live in buildings should be aware of this, and they should be capable and knowledgeable to ask from the architect that what's the indoor environment that you are going to give to them, right? So if we can inculcate that knowledge to the public, then they will question architects and engineers. Okay, what is the space that you are going to give me? Right? What is the indoor temperature level? Is it with the ambient? Is it below the ambient? It's higher than the ambient. So that's the attitude that we need to inculcate. Because why? Because of the problem that we are going to face, according to synthesis report of IPCC 2023, shows that a child born in 2020 will be 70 years in 2019, and the child, whether he or she will have to live with climate problems, heat stress, and all related problems. So which one do you want to select? Are we going to have the same practice continue, or are we going to have attitude change every one of us? So thank you very much for every one of you. I'm very glad to the audience here physically and all the viewers who are joining online. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Upendra Rajapakse, for sharing your expertise on setting equation in the art of marking architecture at net zero. Your expertise have greatly enriched our understanding of this critical topic. And also, we are grateful for your contribution to our inaugural lecture series as well. And now I would like to invite the Dean of Faculty of Architecture, Professor Yasandika Sandanayake, to hand over the token of appreciation, a memento of the event, to our speaker. And once again, I would like to invite Professor Upendra Rajapakse to accept the token of appreciation. Thank you. And now it's time to extend our thanks to our sponsors of this event. Cargill's, the event sponsor, Daily FT, the print media sponsor, and our social media partner, Sri Lankan Scientist. And now we have reached the end of this session. And thank you, all of you, for joining us this occasion and making this event a success. Have a good day.